Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to speak about all things recovery. So essentially, if you're constantly feeling tired, fatigued, stressed, you're not performing good in the gym, you're not sleeping well, it could be just signs or symptoms that you're under-recovered or under-fueled. So I'm going to speak about in this episode, essentially, the signs of recovery, the 3 R's of recovery, the impact nutrition has on recovery, the impact your training has on recovery, the impact sleep has on recovery, along with just some lifestyle issues. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Adrian McDonnell. I'm a full-time online health and fitness coach. We coach busy working professionals, look, feel and perform their utmost best. So going straight into the science of recovery, I want you to think of your training at the moment as like a baseline level, that we all have the baseline level that we're able to do. So for example, your baseline level could be that you're able to bench press 60 kilos for 8 reps. You're able to run a 5-kilometer race in 25 minutes, okay? Whatever your baseline is, that's what we're able to do. If we want to get better though, naturally enough, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, which is the definition of insanity. You need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So let's just say, for example, you go to the gym one day and you do 60 kilos, not for 8 reps, but you do it for 9 reps or maybe even 10 reps, okay? You've surpassed your baseline level of fitness. You've pushed yourself and done something you haven't done before. Now, if you give yourself enough time to recover, to rehydrate, to refuel, to eat the right food, okay? And then you return back to the gym, whether it's 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, or just in that training block, and now you're able to do 60 kilos for 10, 11, or even 12 reps. That's essentially the law of super compensation, where you take yourself at your baseline level, okay? You train hard enough to give your body a stimulus, through enough time and through enough nutrition, through the right recovery strategy, you give yourself enough time to return to the gym again and become stronger. And by giving yourself enough time and by giving yourself the right food, that is essentially where super compensation or growth occurs. However, this really comes down to the stimulus and the response, okay? If you push yourself too hard, so imagine you're able to do 60 kilos for 8 reps, and then one day in the gym you get 60 kilos for 9 reps, but then you decide to do 3 drop sets where you do 50 kilos for another 6 grinding reps, you drop it to 40 and so on. You're just pushing yourself to a point where you're probably overtrained. But on the flip side, if you're able to do 60 kilos for 8 reps and you go to the gym and you do it for 4 or 5 reps, it's like you're not giving your body enough stimulus to get a response. So essentially with the science of recovery, it means that you need to give your body a stimulus, so train hard enough, just outside your comfort zone that's pushing you more than you've done before, but not too hard that you can't, we'll say, recover from it. And once you find that sweet spot, that's essentially where the fitness gains will come in. However, to find the sweet spot where you essentially make gains, you need to find the right balance of fatigue so you can recover from it. So if you have too much or too little, as I already said, you're not going to make gains. Now, fatigue can come in a number of different ways. So the first way is with your training. So not every exercise in the gym is created equal. So for example, if your training is a set of bicep curls to failure, that's going to have a much different response in your body than if you're doing a set of deadlifts to failure or a set of barbell back squats to failure, okay? So the type of exercise you're doing is going to be important here. Also the frequency. So how often are you training? If you're only training once a week, you're probably not giving your body enough chance to actually improve and to essentially to grow. If you're training 7 days a week, two times a day, well then you're probably giving your body too much stimulus and you're not able to manage the fatigue. Okay, so fatigue with your training is one thing, but it's not just with your training, also with your sleep. So lack of sleep or just not optimizing your sleep, this can obviously have a massive impact upon your fatigue or your tiredness levels, your nutrition. So like I know myself sometimes, if I am under fueled from, whether it's like not eating the right foods or just not giving myself enough carbohydrates or protein post workout, I sometimes will feel this the next day. One of our members, he actually asked us, one of our clients, should I, because I train so late at night, should I skip my protein shake and just have it first thing in the morning? I told him, have your protein shake post workout, because that's essentially, you've broken down muscle fiber, you need to give your body enough chance to recover, okay? Other causes of fatigue include, so lack of sleep you already mentioned, but also overuse of drugs or stimulants. So naturally enough, if you are drinking on a Saturday night and then you try to do a max effort session on a Sunday, your performance is probably not going to be as good. Okay, I think no one can disagree with this. And also as well, just all the causes of fatigue include just lifestyle and stress. So like if you're going through a stressful period, maybe your partner is pregnant, maybe you are preparing for a interview that you really want to crush, but by God, it's like you're up late at night and you're really stressing over it, or it could just be any form of stress at all, family, personal, related, okay? This can have a massive impact upon your fatigue level. So it's important you balance your fatigue with your training and with your, essentially, to make fitness gains so that you're giving your body enough stimulus to get that response. So once we give your body enough stimulus, then we need to speak about recovery, how to actually optimize your recovery. recovery. So first thing I'm going to speak about is the 3 R's of recovery. The first R is refuel. So refuel essentially means that we refuel with the right amount of food. So what food should you eat post-workout? So two main things are going to be protein and carbohydrates. So protein, first of all, this stimulates something called muscle protein synthesis. It's essentially where, imagine that your muscles, they look like a steak, okay, before you work out. During your workout then, imagine the steak gets crumbled to mince, okay? So you've broken down the muscle tissues, the muscle fibers, okay? But then after your workout, through enough nutrition and through enough rest, your mince there, it becomes a lean steak burger, okay? That's essentially like what happens when you're training in the gym. You break down muscle fibers through enough time, through the proper nutrition, you'll be able to build them and grow them and obviously increase your muscular size. So that's why protein post-workout, first of all, with the refuel is so important. Next up then is going to be carbohydrates. So what do carbohydrates do? Well, essentially during your workout, you're going to be using stored glucose or glycogen, which is carbohydrates. So carbohydrates give your body energy. So when you tap into your energy stores and you break them down, okay, you need to refuel and replenish your energy stores, which is why carbohydrates post-workout are really important. As well, post-workout, what's important to know is that your cortisol level, which is your stress hormone, that naturally gets elevated, okay? So what are some good ways to reduce your cortisol post-workout is by consuming carbohydrates and also consuming protein. So generally what I recommend when it comes to carbohydrates and protein post-workout is, depending on your goals, because if you're in a fat loss phase, okay, your calories are not going to be as high as someone in a muscle building phase, but at least a 1-to-1 protein to carb ratio is what I recommend. Up to a 1-to-3 if you're in a building phase. So what that might mean is minimum 30 grams of protein post-workout. So let's just say you have 30 grams of protein. A 1-to-1 ratio would be 30 grams of protein, 30 grams of carbs. 1-to-2 ratio would be you have 30 grams of protein, 60 grams of carbs, and a 1-to-3 would be 30 grams of protein and 90 grams of carbs. Not carbs. So essentially the protein to carb ratio you have post-workout, it's going to be dependent on your individual goals, but the first R in the 3 R's of recovery is going to be refuel, and protein and carbs are going to be king for that. So the second R in recovery is going to be rehydrate. Rehydration comes from your water intake and your electrolyte intake. So when it comes to water intake, what we recommend in Mac Lifestyle Fitness is you drink at least 30 to 50 milliliters per kilo of body weight. So for example, let's just say you are 80 kilos, 80 times 30 milliliters is 2.4 liters a day in the low end, 80 times 50 milliliters is 4 liters a day. Okay, now when it comes to water intake too, the best way to know if you're hydrated or not, just simply analyze your urine color. So if your urine is, we'll say, the same color as water, that's a good indication that you're hydrated. But if your urine, especially after exercise, is like yellow or orangey color, it's just an indication you're somewhat dehydrated and you need to rehydrate yourself. That's why having water and post-workout is super important. However, if you're someone who sweats a lot as well, that's where electrolytes come in. Okay, so your electrolytes are essentially your sodium, your potassium, and your magnesium. And you can essentially just get an electrolyte drink, something like Lucozade Sport, for example. It could be probably the most common one that you would know. Or you could just do things like salt in your food and just ensuring that you've got the right balance of electrolytes. You will know if you don't have the right balance of electrolytes if, let's just say you've drank a lot of water, so you're not thirsty, but you feel somewhat dizzy, or you just feel like, almost like you're ready to faint, okay? That's probably an indication that your electrolyte balance is off and you need to actually consume. Another indication too for your electrolytes is if you're constantly cramping up. So, you're drinking lots of water, but you're getting these terrible cramps. It's just an indication that you need to balance out your electrolytes. So again, getting an electrolyte drink or supplement usually works well. Now the final R is actually recover. So when it comes to recovery, there's essentially two main types. You've got passive recovery and you've active recovery. So passive recovery is going to be the most powerful one. It's going to be sleep. Okay, I'll speak about sleep in a moment, but just sleep is the most underrated way to actually recover. Other things that will include relaxation, meditation, mindfulness, human connection, just spending time with some, family or friend members, along with listening to music, okay? Then when it comes to active recovery, this is where you're actively doing something to speed up the recovery process. So common ones nowadays include, cold plunges, sauna, ice bath, steam room, other things as well, like, let's say, foam rolling, soft myofascial release. All of these tools can be very beneficial. However, as I said though, sleep is the most underrated form of recovery that most people neglect. And just for context, my understanding of sleep really changed when I listened to an episode on Joe Rogan's podcast well over 6 years ago at this stage with someone called Dr. Matthew Walker. He essentially wrote a book called Why We Sleep. And on that podcast, Matthew Walker, he mentioned a few things that really resonated with me. One of them being that lack of sleep can increase your appetite the following day by up to 25%. So for example, imagine you're in a fat loss journey, you're consuming 2,000 calories a day. That could be the difference between consuming 2,000 and 2,500 calories simply because you lack sleep. Because when you think about it, it makes sense. what happens when you lack sleep? You lack energy, you feel tired. What gives us energy? What raises our energy levels? Food. Okay, so we often tend to turn to food when we're lacking or deficient in sleep. But as well as this, what Walker spoke with is the type of food that we, I'm no different to you. When I lack sleep, you probably crave sugar, you probably crave the carrots or the chocolate more than the carrot sticks, okay? So the type of food you crave as well after a poor night's sleep, it tends to be more high in sugar, highly processed. So that is why sleep is the most underrated tool that we're probably all neglecting to some degree to actually speed up and enhance your recovery. Now, when it comes to poor sleep as well, it's not just going to impact your appetite, it's also going to impact your workout performance too. You know yourself, you don't feel perform as good after a poor night's sleep compared to after when you sleep well. I just know myself sometimes, like, God damn, I slept well today. You just know waking up, then other days you're like, shit, I feel a bit groggy, my mind isn't as good, and then often your performance is not as good. Now, sleep can also, or poor sleep should I say, can actually make weight loss harder. So in an interesting study done with two groups, one group got 5.5 hours or less sleep, the other group got 8.5 hours or more sleep. Both groups were consuming the exact same number of calories. However, 70% of the weight after the end of a 3-month term, the group that got 5.5 hours or less sleep loss was from lean muscle mass. Okay, so imagine 70% of the weight they lost came from lean muscle mass. Now, when you're cutting weight, okay, the last thing you want to do is lose muscle. You want to maximize and maintain as much muscle as possible. So otherwise you just turn out to be skinny fat. So you can be doing all the training, you can be doing the right nutrition, but if you're not giving yourself enough chance to get at least 7 or 8 hours of quality sleep, that could be a big thing that's going to impact upon your look, your performance, your muscular gain. The final thing with poor sleep is, as you know yourself, it's going to poor cognitive performance. It's going to lead to lack of mental clarity, brain fog, fatigue. You just not being able to think clearly, okay? And that is why if there's one underlying thing I'd recommend for recovery, forget about, I'm not saying, foam rolling, all these things aren't good, but make sure you're freaking giving yourself a chance to actually get a good night's sleep. Now, part 2, optimizing sleep then, will essentially be, first of all, coming up with a sleep routine. So I was recently, not recently, but I was at a fitness event before, and a expert in sleep was speaking about one of the most underrated habits you can implement to just get a better night's sleep. He was on my podcast, his name is Tom Coleman, and he spoke about establishing a sleep routine. So sleep routine is essentially where you try to get up and you go to bed at the same or similar time, within an hour of each other, 7 days a week. Now, where a lot of people fall down is they do this consistently Monday to Friday because they're probably working 40 hours a week or so, but then weekends, if you're off work, that's where often someone's sleep routine can kind of fall off track, meaning you might be more likely to feel tired on Monday because you've been out of your routine for a day or two. Okay, whereas if you wake up naturally at the same time without an alarm, that's a really good sign that you're dialed into a sleep routine. So the first thing that I would recommend is just create a sleep routine where you try to go to bed and get up at the same or similar time every single day. Now, another way to optimize your sleep is just address your alcohol and your caffeine intake. So with our clients, we recommend not to cut caffeine 10 hours at least before bed. So usually for most people, but no caffeine after 12 midday, simply because caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 6 hours. Okay, so the caffeine that you have at midday, it could be out of your system up to midnight. So that's why it's important you limit your caffeine intake, and obviously, as we know, alcohol can have a negative impact upon your sleep. Now, having drank alcohol before quite a bit in the past, up to 2 or 3 times a week, thankfully I've gone through that phase now. A lot of people will say to me, but alcohol, after I drink alcohol, I fall asleep immediately. So there's a difference between sleep quality and sleep quantity. And just because you fall asleep easier doesn't mean the type and the quality of sleep you get is better. And that's why alcohol, it can essentially make it harder for you to get into what we call deep REM sleep. So REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep, and that is a deep restorative sleep that we want to get into on a daily basis, because that's what's going to make you feel refreshed and re-energized upon waking up. Now, other ways to optimize your sleep are nutrition. So interestingly enough, just this last week gone by, I've adjusted my nutrition plan because I train first thing in the morning around 7 a.m. I'll have my breakfast. I used to train fasted at 6 a.m. or 6. I used to train fasted essentially, but now I've stopped training fasted and I train fed. So I'll have carbohydrates and protein pre-workout, usually something like cream of rice with a scoop of protein and a chopped banana. But I've started having that at roughly 6 a.m. but I'll try now stop eating by 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. at the latest, which is 2 or 3 hours before bed for me. And just what I've noticed this last week is I've actually lost 1 kilogram in weight from my scale weight in the morning at least from doing this, no adjustment at all to my calories. Now, I am aware a big part of that is probably because I'm not eating as late at night, so there's less bloating, but still just an interesting trend nonetheless. But usually what I recommend is the 10-3-2-1 rule. So 10 hours before bed, no caffeine. Then 2 to 3 hours before bed, try to limit food and water intake. You want to limit your water as well around bed, because that you don't want to be getting up in the middle of the night going to the bathroom. And then food as well, like generally speaking, you don't want to be digesting a big meal before bed. So if you do eat before bed, the smaller the meal generally I recommend. I wouldn't be golloping down a steak with some vegetables and a lot of potatoes and going to bed 30 minutes later, okay? Other ways in to optimize your sleep are exercise. So first of all, just being in a consistent exercise routine. That's what one of our members said, that I'm sleeping way better through the night now because previously he was quite inactive, and just by exercising more, by moving more, he optimizes sleep. As well as this though, the timing of the exercise is important. So generally I wouldn't recommend doing any form of intensive exercise at least 2 hours before bed. So like if you're someone who likes to train in the evening and you go to bed at 10 at night, I would try finish up your training by like 7:30 at the latest, just to make sure that you're not just in this stressed out, elevated cortisol state, and you give yourself enough chance to wind down and to essentially prepare for bed. Now, personally, this is one thing that really helps me in my sleep, is just do a brain dump. So here beside me, you will see a notebook, and every evening before I sign out of work, I would essentially write out my to-do list, or what I get to do for tomorrow, today. This just for me, it's just any thoughts that are on my mind or anything I need to think of. It's like you come up with a good idea, I just put it from out of my head and get it onto paper, okay? That really helps me. Now, with limited electronics then, that's another thing. So I recommend the one for the 10-3-2-1 rule stands for 1 hour before bed, try to limit work and electronics, simply because electronics can impact your melatonin levels, making it harder for you to wind down. All right. Now, a big thing with good sleep is actually your sleep environment. So what I recommend is make sure your room is like almost a bat cave. You don't want bright lights coming in. You want blackout curtains. You want it very dark and minimal light at all, so you get it, you give your body the best opportunity to get a good night's sleep. And then finally, sometimes a good night's sleep, it starts with the morning, that particular morning. And a lot of research indicating that if you get some morning sunlight in the first few hours of the day, this can essentially just set your circadian rhythm, it's like your body's internal clock, and aid with you getting a better night's sleep later on that evening. Okay, so sleep is probably the most powerful form of passive recovery. As I said, other things include, meditation, listening to music, spending time with like-minded people, and so on. But now let's speak about active recovery. So active recovery is when you're actively doing something to speed up your recovery process. So the first thing you can do is something like foam rolling. So an easy way to do is just keep the foam roller in the house. Keep it maybe when you're watching television. Sometimes I used to do that when I had one, is just when I'm watching television, I might do foam rolling for 5 or 10 minutes. Personally, what I use now is second thing, which is soft tissue release or myofascial release. I would essentially get a Schlitter and I roll out my glutes, I roll out my hamstring, and by God, it doesn't hit the trigger points there, but it feels so good after it. Another way is just stretching, okay? So stretching, you can do this, post-workout or in the evening time. It's a nice way to relax as well before bedtime too, and it can just loosen up some stiff muscles. Physio massage is obviously another way that you can improve and speed up your recovery. Cold exposure then. So a lot of people are doing ice baths, cryotherapy, and to be fair, anytime I do it, I always feel like I have a new pair of legs. So if you can dedicate the time to doing this, even just a few times a week or once a week even, a cold shower doesn't have the same effect, but it can still have somewhat of a positive effect. And then the opposite of that is heat exposure. That's going to be things like sauna and steam room. Also, you can do something called contrast therapy, where you alternate between a cold shower and a warm shower, or even better, a ice bath and essentially a heated bath or a warm bath. There are all some ways you can incorporate active recovery, along with just maybe the most underrated one, just walking more. So one of the worst things you can do on a non-training day, a rest day, is just sit down and not budge from the couch at all, okay? The more blood flow you have, to a degree at least, the better your recovery will be. So that's why even on a non-training day, what we recommend our clients do is get at least 8,000 steps in per day, and this will just help, wash off some of the fatigue essentially, get some blood flow there, and you'll all start feeling much better. Okay, so we spoke about the science of recovery. We spoke about essentially the 3 R's of recovery: refuel, rehydrate, recover. And the nutrition side in particular being important, protein and carbohydrates post-workout. We obviously spoke about, your training volume and managing that. That's going to have a huge impact. We spoke about the likes of rehydration through water, electrolytes, and then active and passive recovery. But now I want to speak about recovery duration. So essentially, how long will it take you to recover? So first of all, during your workout, if you're just, say, doing a gym workout, if you're doing something like a big compound lift, like a squat or a deadlift, it's probably going to take at least 2 minutes before you fully recover. Now, the mistake here is not to think just because you're not out of breath that you're fully recovered, okay? So imagine you do something like a bench press. and 30 seconds later, you may not be breathless, you may be absolutely fine. But just because you're not sweating doesn't mean you're fully recovered. There's your central nervous system, and that does take longer to recover. So generally what we recommend for your compound lifts is you recover, give yourself at least 2 minutes. Then for isolation accessory movements, that's where we recommend 60 to 90 seconds. So for example, if you're doing something like bicep curls, calf raises, tricep pushdowns, lateral raises, you probably need to give yourself no more than 60 to 90 seconds before you're able to go again. All right? Now recovery then between your workouts. So generally what I recommend is don't train each body part, another body part, at least 24 to 48 or sorry, not 24, but rather 48 to 72 hours after that initial workout, particularly when it comes to weights. Run and know it is different. Okay, so 48 to 72 hours. So let's just say you train your legs on a Monday. Ideally, we're not training our legs again in the gym at least for until Thursday, which will give you 72 hours. Okay, but with that being said, everyone has a different recovery capacity, which I'll speak about. So for example, the more well trained you are, the more frequent you're going to be able to train. Someone like Nick Bear now, who I admire, like he runs basically 8 to 10 miles every single morning, okay? But he didn't start out like that. He built it up over time, and his body is just a high stress tolerance. It's a high load tolerance. But I was speaking to someone yesterday, and he was off training for the past couple of months, and then he entered into a high rocks. So he basically went from like 0 to a 10, went back running a lot, and he just felt that shin splints started kicking in. He wasn't able to recover. He wasn't able to train as hard because he just put his joints in too much stress or too much overload too quickly. So that's why with the recovery duration, you need to match the type of training you're doing to your recovery capacity and then make adjustments based off that. And this is why, as I said at the start, recovery, a lot of it will come down to your training and the volume that you're doing. Okay, and that's why everyone has this thing called your MRV, which is your max recoverable volume, and this is essentially the max amount of training or volume you can do on a weekly basis that your body is able to recover from. And what we don't want to do is you don't want to surpass that level. I've been there before. It's like, you know, let's just say that your max recoverable volume for your chest is that you do 15 working sets a week, and 1 week you do maybe 20 working sets, okay? That onset of fatigue can just mean that it's going to delay the recovery, and the very first thing we spoke about is stimulus, response, you're feeling tired, and then you get the stimulus. So the stimulus is the training, okay? The recovery period comes next, and then through recovery, through training, through nutrition, that's where the super compensation and the growth will come in. The problem is though, if you train too hard, okay, and you're pushing yourself too hard, and then you train again in a detrained or unrecovered state, that just means that you're probably not going to be making fitness gains, and you might actually be relapsing. So when it comes to managing your recovery, a huge thing is going to be your training volume, and that's why I recommend it's always best to start out with less and build up. Okay, like it's way easier to add more rather than to take away. And often when people have to take away, they get injured as a result of doing so, and they learn through experience. I've learned first-hand experience myself. Sometimes I've just pushed it too hard, and this often results in like an injury or something happen, or even just a reduction in strength, a reduction in my willingness or desire to train, where I just know I need to scale things back. Okay, so then between your training recovery, so this is where you can implement things like you periodize your training and you do things like deload week. So a deload week is essentially where you deload your training volume, or you reduce your training volume by probably 50% or so. So imagine that you're working out, this could be that you're working out for 4 days a week, you go from 4 to 2 days, and you're working out at 100% intensity where you're pushing yourself really hard, but you go from 100% to 50%. So for example, a practical example could be that instead of doing 100 kilos for 10 reps on a squat, you do 100 kilos for a set of 5. Okay, so you're only pushing yourself to 50% of your capacity. So deload weeks are an effective way to manage your training volume. However, with that being said, I would say like unless you're really like taking it to a high level and really monitoring your training, a lot of people just deload consciously or subconsciously by the weekends, and it's like, you know, taking a few rest days here and there. So what I'm a bigger fan of with our clients is we implement something called essentially diet breaks or maintenance breaks, where we adjust their calories in training to coincide with like an upcoming holiday or an event. So if someone, for example, is saying they're going away at Easter, they're going away at Christmas, that might be a good time that we do a diet break with them, where we take their calories from a calorie deficit if they're focused on losing body fat to a calorie maintenance at each where we focus on maintaining. But you can look into deloads. I'm actually, as of recording this, I'm on a deload. I'm doing a half marathon in 2 days time. So I've tapered down my training this week and just reduced the volume, reduced the intensity. So just kind of play it by ear there. And just sometimes you need to understand as well, you can deload your training depending on how you're feeling that day, okay? So let's just say if you didn't sleep well, you're dealing with a lot of stress at work and you've got some hard deadlines to meet, okay? Maybe for that day and you're just not feeling recovered after your first few warm-up sets, that you just reduce the volume and you reduce the intensity. That is okay. But what you don't want to do is just get to a point where you're essentially overtraining and you're pushing the pendulum too hard. Now, next up we're going to speak about then is just everyday stress, lifestyle stress, and recovery. So the first thing to consider with lifestyle stress is distress and eustress and the difference between both. So distress is bad stress, eustress is good stress. So not all stress is created equal, not all stress is bad. Like when you think about it, stress will cause you to grow. So for example, you go to the gym, okay, you put your body under stress. Through enough recovery, okay, you come back, you're able to return stronger again. Okay, that is good stress, or that's what we call eustress. Distress is where, let's just say from a fitness standpoint, you run a marathon on Sunday, okay? You do a marathon PR, 3 hours, 30 minutes. Then you decide that you're going to run a marathon again the following day in a completely detrained or unrecovered state, and you run that marathon in 5 hours, okay? That is distress, and that's just like putting your body under too much stress. But then this also comes just from a lifestyle perspective as well, that eustress can be like, you know, let's just say that you have a work project on and it's pushing you outside of your comfort zone, but you know you're able to do it. Okay, it stretches you, but not stretches you too far. That's eustress. But distress is that, let's just say you're at level 5 and you try to do a level 10 task that's just way outside your capabilities or your skill capacity. That's essentially distress. Okay, so first of all, just understand the difference between two. The next up is just the mindset and your perception of stress. So like everything essentially is neutral in life. So for example, if you're stuck in traffic, one person could see that as a stressful event. They're late for work, this is the worst thing ever. Someone else could see that as a good thing, that you know what, okay, I'm late for work, but this gives me an opportunity to listen to my audiobook. The two people have the exact same situation, but their perception of stress is completely different. So how you perceive things, your view in the world, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? Okay, that can impact upon your stress. Next up is just physical stress then. So physical stress can be, signs of this can be like, if you're physically stressed, you encounter a strength reduction in the gym, you're not able to lift as good, you encounter more soreness or fatigue where your recovery is not as good, you're retaining water and you're storing more water. So water, that can just be like an excess amount of cortisol, and your sleep quality is impaired, okay? They're all signs of physical stress and that you're in a physically stressed state. Mental stress then, this just comes from like motivation, mood swings, that you just have like, you lose your drive, you lose your will to do things, and you're not really looking forward to everyday tasks that maybe in the past you would have. That could just be a case that you've put yourself under too much mental stress that your body is able to tolerate. And then finally, just your well-being. So stress can impact your well-being, that let's just say too much stress can cause libido issues. So when I was doing the bodybuilding last year, I put my body under a lot of stress and did something, or 2 years ago at this stage, did something I'd never done before, okay? I was never in that zone before. So my libido significantly reduced because my calories were lower and I was in a very, very fatigued state for, 15, 16 weeks on end. Okay, so too much stress as well can cause digestive issues where you're not able to digest your food, you've got too much bloating, or some people, they actually lose their appetite when they are too stressed. So it's just first of all important that you're aware of the different kinds of stress between good stress and bad stress, and just understand as well, everyone has a stress tolerance. So for example, Donald Trump, like him or lump him, his stress tolerance is very, very high. Something like a 3 on Donald Trump's stress level could be like 100 for somebody else, because he just dealt with so much stuff. So we need to understand where his stress level is and where his stress limit is, and just make sure that we do not surpass this, okay? Next up then with stress is just how to actually cope with stress. So first of all, just understand controlling. That, is this inside or outside of your control? So for example, like, you have a match of the weekend, it's outside of your control if it rains or not. Okay, you cannot control the weather. Some things you can control. You can control your actions, your thoughts, the thoughts you think, the actions you take, but you cannot control some things. So just understand what is inside and what is outside of your control. Next up is when you're training. So again, coping with stress is with your training stress. Are you warming up properly? Okay, or are you just going straight into your workout? Don't warm up to train to warm up. okay? That's what a lot of people do, that they just use their first working set as their warm-up, okay? That's not how it works. Make sure you get some mobility, you get some movement in, you get some sweat on, okay? Are you cooling down properly? Are you doing the right amount of volume? Are you doing too much volume that your body is not able to recover from it? With your nutrition then, so how to cope with stress from a nutrition standpoint, again, protein is going to be very, very important for repairing muscle breakdown, and then carbohydrates for replenishing your energy stores. When it comes to supplements, so supplements that I personally use to help reduce stress are L-theanine, can have a calming effect on your body. Ashwagandha and magnesium, I take those before bed. Again, they can help just soothe and relax the mind. Allowing some omega-3 supplements, or just taking like omega-3 foods like salmon, because they can reduce inflammation. Now, sleeping 7 hours, as we know, one of the most effective ways to deal with your stress is just to sleep more. So with an increase in sleep usually comes a reduction in C, a reduction in cortisol. Okay, now I'm coping stress in active versus passive recovery. So some of those techniques can help you reduce your stress. Your environment is also going to be huge here. So for example, that you just might be in a toxic environment where the people around you, they put you in a negative mood or a bad mood, or maybe it's your location that you just feel a bit depressed whenever you visit there. So you can change your environment to reduce your stress levels. Then relaxation methods. So this can be things like just meditating, listening to music, walking. That's what I find personally works well for me, meditation and walking. That's an effective way to cope with stress. And then finally, as I already mentioned, planning. So here I have my journal here, and I will schedule out what I'm going to do tomorrow, today. Okay, and that for me, because I like certainty, I like, having a routine and plan in place. So by writing it down, it just helps alleviate and reduce my stress. Okay, so that is essentially everything you need to know when it comes to recovery, when it comes to stress management, when it comes to managing your training, your nutrition, your sleep, active, passive recovery, and everything in between. So look, I hope you found the podcast or the YouTube video helpful. If you want to see more content like this, please just let me know, and I can of course create more. If you want more assistance, we'll say managing your stress, managing your training, managing nutrition, we do offer one-to-one coaching at Mac Lifestyle Fitness. So I'll post a link in the bio there if you want to fill out a one-to-one application form where we can schedule a call and see if your coaching is a good fit for you. If you want to see daily fitness content, then please make sure you check out my Instagram page, Adrian_Mac Lifestyle Fitness. That is where I essentially post 7 days a week. All right. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. And if you're listening to my Lifestyle Lifter Show podcast on Spotify or Apple, please make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on our weekly uploads. But that is all for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one.